Hello, and welcome back to the Royal Watcher podcast after quite a big break. I'm Saad, and I'm joined again by our lovely Sam to discuss the long-awaited Cartier exhibition at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, which I think is one of the highlights of the past few years.
Yeah, I think it's probably the most important jewelry exhibition since the Queen's
The second
Jubilee one
one,
at
yeah.
Buckingham Palace. So yes, it's an amazing, amazing collection of jewels that the V&A and Cartier have managed to bring together.
Yes, it's amazing. And especially, I think the amount of royal and noble loans at this exhibit. There are some pieces which are really iconically Cartier, but there's some special pieces which have appeared after quite a long time. And that's very special to see.
Mm.
Yeah, I think this is just a general overview of kind of some of the royal noble jewels which we're going to be discussing today. But I think we can move on to the next slide and talk about our two visits to the Cartier exhibit in July, and we're hopefully going to be going again in a few weeks. So it is really one of those things where I feel we can see so much, and there's something kind of new to see every time, and new aspects of the exhibition that we're able to see on our different visits.
Yes, so unfortunately, the first time we went, it was in the middle of a heat wave, so I don't think we were in the best mood to appreciate everything, even though it was stunning on the first view. Um,
Yes, and actually, it was air conditioned inside, which was a
Yes,
miracle
it
from
was a
our side. Yeah,
miracle. I
but
think that's the worst thing. The thing I take away from my first visit was there was air conditioning.
which to those who were in London in July would know it was
Yeah,
really horrible.
yeah.
So that was a very nice change, and but it was crowded on our first visit. However, if we go to the next slide, we'll show a preview of our second visit, which was kindly arranged for us by Helen Molesworth, who's the jewelry curator at the V&A, and she invited us and our friend Queen Aziza of Pahang for a private tour of the exhibit, and that was so special.
Yes, that was amazing, once in a lifetime, and I don't think we can thank Helen enough for that.
Oh, exactly. It was really such an amazing experience, and I think I'll never forget that. Especially, I think being able to see everything with the curator, and I'm sure I bothered Helen quite a bit, but we went into so many different tangents in front of every exhibit. I think it took us 2 hours to get through the whole thing. It was the most kind of, it was a jewelry lover's dream.
It really was.
So I think before we get into it, just a general overview. So the exhibit starts with the great Manchester tiara, which is part of the V&A's permanent exhibit. But what I really liked was how the different kind of art, the countries were divided in the first exhibition hall, and they showed kind of Egypt, India, China, Japan, and how Cartier created jewelry inspired by artifacts and objects from those countries, and the different kind of international impact that Cartier has had for clients in those countries as well as international clients, which has really become a part of Cartier's iconic style. And then Helen really juxtaposed that with the objects from the V&A's collection, which are from those countries, and you could see the inspiration in the design and the culture that Cartier drew from. And we can move from here into the next slide, which was the kind of our favorite room. I think this was the tiara room, which comes at the very end of the exhibit, but it was, I think, just the most magnificent place, and it was just a pleasure to be around.
Yes, they had some absolutely amazing pieces, all the way from the Edwardian style to the modern era, to the modern incarnations of the tiara that Cartier sort of designed up until the 60s, really, wasn't it? Or
Yeah, actually, and there were a few contemporary tiaras as well made kind of in the last decade or so. I
yes,
think some of
true.
the
Yeah.
pretty fruity stuff, but I mean, different iterations, and I think this the tiara we can see in the foreground here with that massive emerald that was made in 2006 or
Yes.
2012. I can't remember which one, but it was another one of those modern pieces. But you could really see the inspiration it drew from the past styles.
Mm.
Yeah, and then I think we move on from here to the start, which was the jewelry loaned by King Charles. Among them, I think the most magnificent was the Williamson pink diamond brooch, which really I think was spectacular to see. The diamond is massive. And the fact that it's one of those pieces that are still that is worn by Queen Camilla and is such an iconic part of the late Queen. it was really special to see that on display.
It was. I'm very surprised it was on display because, as you say, it's such a massive pink stone, pink diamond, and it's such a rarity that, yeah, I was very surprised it left the vault.
Yeah, and it was quite nice to see that. And then alongside that were two Cartier brooches that belong to the Queen Mother. And I think this is some of those things that are really iconically part of her collection. She was a big patron of Cartier. Her husband bought a lot of Cartier jewels. So for this kind of intimate jewels to be on display, that was very special. And I like that the V&A were able to find the original drawings of the ruby clip brooches, and that showed the different iterations of that, and also the drawings for the Williamson pink diamond brooch. So you could see
Mm,
kind of what different elements that went into its construction, what it might have been if it with the different designs.
yes, I always appreciate the concept drawings that go along with the pieces.
Yeah, it was very special. So this was kind of the main loans from the royal collection. There were a couple of other pieces. There was a necklace. There's a bracelet from the late Queen, which was an 18th birthday gift to her. There were a couple of smaller pieces, but I think these are the most kind of iconic ones, and it was lovely to see them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we can move on to another royal loan, which was the Princess Royal's Cartier Aquamarine Fine Flower Tiara, which the Queen Mother received from the King in 1938. And it was given as a wedding gift to Princess Anne in 73. And it had gone a bit of a change in the 80s. And this was now on display. It was a striking piece, but I wouldn't say it's the most attractive tiara. And it suits Princess Anne, but it's not necessarily a very wearable piece.
It's not, but it's definitely.
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.
It's not necessarily a very wearable piece.
It's not, but it's definitely of its time.
Oh, definitely, yes. And I think this is one of those pieces I think that sometime in the future suspect it may actually enter the Cartier collection because it is something that is now associated a lot with Cartier exhibitions and stuff. So there is a general pipeline that I can see for that tiara.
Yeah, and I mean the Princess Royal does favor her festoon tiara, doesn't she?
Yeah. The festoon and the meander tiara.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a bit out there. But it was nice to see and nice that she learned something,
Mm.
which is very rare. And then I think our favorite piece comes in the next slide, which is the magnificent Duchess of Gloucester's Cartier India tiara. And that's something I saw last year already, and we discussed that in our video on the Cartier exhibition in Abu Dhabi. But it was just amazing to see it again. And it really is, I think, the highlight of the Cartier collection.
Okay, that's your favorite piece. It's not mine.
No, I think it's just magnificent. So this is my favorite.
Yeah, sure.
And we know Weaver's coming up, so.
Yes.
Yeah, no, this is, I think, from the tiaras, this was probably the largest one on display, and the fact that it does still belong to a royal collection and still worn regularly, that I think makes it a lot more special than quite a lot of the other pieces on display.
Mm.
Yeah, and then I think we can go to the next slide where we have Princess Margaret's Cartier Rose brooch, and this is one of the most iconic pieces from her collection, and that she wore to the Queen's coronation and quite a lot in her younger years, and then it was sold at auction. And now it's become one of those pieces in the Cartier collection that does tour around. But this is the first time I ever saw it, and I thought it was quite lovely to see.
Yeah, I'd say this is one of my favorite royal jewels, and it's actually become quite an iconic piece for Cartier. I mean, it was featured heavily on the promotion for this exhibition, so it's an important piece.
Yeah, and it's something that the fact that Princess Margaret only wore like a couple of dozen times in the 50s and the early 60s and then never really wore it again. But it's become such an iconic piece. I think mostly because of Cartier's promotion and the auction that happened 20 years ago. So
Mm.
it's just sharing the history of it and how it's going to progress. That's very interesting.
Mm.
Yeah, and then we move on to the next slide where we have your favorite section,
My
which
favorite
were
section.
all the jewels of the Duchess of Windsor
Not
on
all of
display.
them, but the ones
A good
that were
amount.
lent and are now in the Cartier Heritage Exhibition. But yeah, for those who don't know, I've written a whole series on Wallis Simpson, Duchess of Windsor, and her jewels. So to see so many of them in one place was quite special.
Oh, definitely. And I remember the first time when it was hard to get you to move away from that display case because you kept on coming back to it.
I kept on coming back and I was just getting very annoyed with people because they just didn't get it like I did.
No one was as excited as you were,
No.
I'm afraid.
But
But
it
no,
was
it was lovely to see everything.
It was, and she was such an important customer of Cartier, and well, I mean, I wouldn't like to say that she single-handedly promoted the Cartier Panthère, which is now their icon, their signature piece, but she was definitely very much involved. I mean, her collection of Cartier Panther jewelry totaled 9 pieces in total. It was a huge collection. And the fact that, a lot of them have returned to Cartier is very interesting.
Yes, it's very special, and the fact they've managed to hold on to these iconic pieces, which I think become more and more special as time goes on, especially when you think she was heavily involved in their promotion back in the day, and I think she did not necessarily directly, but she did get a lot of loans of Cartier pieces, and she promoted them. So they became such an iconic part of her look. So the fact they managed to acquire back and then get stuff in loans is quite special for them and their legacy.
Definitely.
And then I think my favorite piece was the flamingo brooch and the necklace from Queen Mary, which is really the only royal jewel she ever received. So that was so interesting to see there.
Yes, it was. It was interesting for me because she did have 2 pearl necklaces, and I was very interested which one had ended up in the Cartier collection, and it turned out it was the royal piece that Queen Mary owned.
Yeah, and this one was later acquired by Kelly Klein, and she sold it at auction a few years ago. So it's nice that
Mm,
Cardi got it back.
yeah.
So then I think we move on to the next slide, which has another iconic, two more iconic royal jewels, which are the Baines de Mer tiara and the engagement ring of Princess Grace of Monaco. And this was uh, very special to see because Princess Grace is another one of those iconic Cartier customers. And this tiara is really such a part of her legacy, and in fact, she wore it all the time. But to see it on display was very special.
Well, very special. And I think Grace comes in a joint first with Wallace. I can't say either one beats them as my favorite jewelry connoisseur. But it's, Grace Kelly, when she became Princess of Monaco, they didn't have a royal jewelry collection. So she had to kind of start one from scratch. And the jeweler that she went to was primarily Cartier and Van Cleef. But this
Yes.
tiara that they made for her sort of symbolized the new Monaco, and it features the Monaco royal colors, which are red and white, rubies and diamonds. So it's a very iconic piece, very important to Monaco's history, and I'm surprised that it's lent out as much as it is. I would, well, I've
Well,
given
it's
up.
not like
I've
they're
given
wearing
up of
it.
Charlene ever wearing it, so at least I got to experience it.
I know.
And also the engagement ring, which, is the iconic, beautiful 10 carat Cartier engagement ring that sort of, as she did with many things, set off a trend for larger engagement rings. But
Yeah, and
one
this
thing that annoyed me was it was such a beautiful stone. I couldn't video it properly because it was too sparkly.
that is such a pity. No,
Such a first world problem.
no, I think it was one of those pieces which
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.
no, I think it was one of those pieces which we've heard about and researched so much, but to see in real life was, I think, it wasn't disappointment. It was lived up to the hype.
Definitely.
Yeah, so we can move on to the next bit, which is Sheikh Moza's iconic Cartier bracelet with the famous Star of the South diamond, which belonged to the Maharajas of Baroda for over a century, and then it was sold in 2003. And Sheikh Moza wore it at the wedding of the Crown Prince of Jordan a few years ago, and to see it on display is very special because the Altani collection, which we'll feature later on, they own quite a lot of iconic Cartier pieces, but the ones they wear are rarely ever loaned out. So the fact that this was is very special.
Yes, I remember you being really excited when she did wear it to the wedding, and then to see it in real life was very special too.
Yes, it was lovely to see. And I think in the next slide we'll see uh, later on a few more Cartier jewels that belong to the Altani collection. But first, we're talking about the Cartier bandeau tiara of Queen Elizabeth of Belgium, which again is one of those pieces that has really become an iconic kind of Cartier symbol. And but it was belonged to the Belgian royal family until the 80s when the Princess Dorothy kind of sold it off because her brother-in-law was part of the Cartier family, and she kind of brokered a deal where it entered the collection, and it's not a part of the Belgian royal collection anymore, which is a bit of a pity. But the fact that it's on display all the time is quite nice.
Yes, it does feature quite heavily in the exhibitions, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's one of those pieces that I think Queen Elizabeth was another one of those people that didn't really have a big jewelry collection to inherit. So this was something that she wore all the time, and she was quite a fascinating figure from the First World War all the way until the 60s, and she wore this regularly. So it's a big part of her symbol, and that it's now in the collection. And it is, again, like the rose brooch, something that they promote all the time.
Hmm.
Yeah, and another kind of tiara that Cartier does promote is in the next slide, which is the olive wreath tiara of Princess Marie Bonaparte, who was the uh, wife of Prince George of Greece, and she wore this tiara quite often. It was quite a versatile piece back in the day. It could be worn with rubies and emeralds, and you could put a star inside it, and she kind of got the full use out of it. She wore this to the coronation of the queen, to the wedding ball, and she really was one of the most fascinating figures because she worked a lot with Freud, and she had, she's one of those kind of iconic figures of the 20th century.
And I love that tiara. I mean, it's takes it straight back to the roots of, if, for people who don't know, tiaras do originate in ancient Greece, and they were sort of laurels of olive branches put on the heads of, I think, Olympians, in
Yes.
ancient Greece. So it's a beautiful combination of ancient Greece, modern Greek princess, diamond tiaras, symbolism. It's fantastic. I love this piece.
Oh, it's lovely. And this is one of those pieces that is so iconically Cartier, and it's the first time I ever saw it in person, and I just loved it.
Mm.
Yeah. And then I think we move on to the next slide, where we have two pieces that I've been really fascinated by. And what I found, and something we actually did discuss with Helen as well, the fact that they were displayed together. So the massive sapphire originally belonged to Queen Marie of Romania, and her husband bought it from Cartier in the early 1920s, and she wore it all the time. And then later on, in the 60s, it was apparently bought from the Romanian royal family by a Greek millionaire and given to Queen Frederica of Greece, who was the aunt of the then King of Romania. So it kind of remained in the extended family for quite a long time. At the same time, beside it, we have the Cartier diamond Sautoir, and sapphire Sautoir of Princess Victoria Melita, which she sold in the 20s to Queen Marie's daughter, Queen Elizabeth of Greece. And this was one of those pieces that was, we knew had been taken out of Romania, and Queen Elizabeth wore it in the 50s, but no one really knew where it kind of ended up. And I think it appeared at some exhibition a few years ago. This is the first time we kind of were able to see it in real life, and it's just spectacular, especially that massive cabochon sapphire pendant.
Yeah, no, it's an amazing piece. And I've always had a bit of a soft spot for Victoria Melita, also known as Ducky. Her biography is fantastic if anyone wants to read it. But yeah, this piece of jewelry has always fascinated me because, yeah, as you say, we knew it had ended up with Elizabeth of Romania, but we didn't know what had happened afterwards. But thankfully, it wasn't broken up, and it's been looked after by Cartier.
Yeah, which it really is a miracle if you think about all the other jewels that were
Mm,
broken up, taken apart. It's very special to see this. And one of the things that I think it wasn't very apparent, but for real jewelry lovers like us, we kind of made the connection that it basically
yeah.
belonged to two sisters and then it ended up in the same family. So that's very special in the long term to see kind of how that was taken into consideration when putting it on display.
It's one of those, if you know, you know.
Exactly. No, this was, I think, one of my highlights of the exhibition to see these both these jewels together, especially
Mm,
that Sutuar. Yeah,
yeah.
and then we move on to the next bit, which has the jewels of the Maharajas, and the highlight of which I think is the Patiala necklace, and that is really spectacular. Like it is out of this world massive.
But it's just a replica, isn't it?
Well, the main diamonds are replicas, but I think the smaller bits are all still the real thing.
Oh, I thought they were
Yeah.
replicas. Oh well, we'll have to go and have a look at that one again.
The largest diamonds, they were taken out and sold off quite a long time ago. And I think the choker is still real, and that
Choker's real,
was
yeah.
yeah, and that was I believe it was acquired from the Patiala royal family around a decade ago.
Hmm.
So that remained with them. There's a lot of controversy about this necklace, and every time it kind of comes out, people have lots of opinions about it, that it was stolen or it was looted and stuff like that. But it was made in 28 by Cartier and worn by the Maharajas of Patiala until 1947 when independence happened and there's a partition of India. After that, the Indian.
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.
There's a partition of India. After that, the Indian government took over the kingdom of Patiala, and the necklace mysteriously went missing. And so online, if you ever search this up, you're going to see all sorts of people making claims that it was stolen by the British when they were leaving India and all sorts of things. But the real reason it went missing on paper was because the Maharaja did not want to hand this necklace over to the Indian government. So they declared it missing. And then at the same time, there were lots of issues with kind of family disputes and inheritance issues. So they quietly took out the big diamonds, sold them off discreetly, and then by the 80s, just kind of the shell of the necklace with all the big diamonds removed was found at a London antique shop by someone working for Cartier, and then they bought it back and restored it. So the history of that is quite fascinating. But if you kind of look it up on a lot of spaces, there you'll find it's a very fractious piece because people have opinions on it, often kind of without any justification.
Yes,
So
so
that's
please make sure you
for
read
you.
the article on it on the Royal Watcher.
Exactly. So this is one of those pieces, and then also it's not Cartier, but if you look at the picture of the Maharaja wearing so many diamonds, there's a big kind of diamond necklace that's suspended kind of on the side of his chest, and that is a necklace that was bought from the estate of Empress Oceanie. So it
Mm,
is one of the pieces from the kind of private collection, and look at the size of those diamonds. So
yeah.
it is the Patiala collection was absolutely massive, and I feel it's kind of special connection to them because one of my great grandfathers was a courtier at the court of the Maharaja,
Mm.
and so I imagine him kind of seeing all of this in person.
Wow,
That must have been very special.
very.
And we move on to the next bit, which is the jewels of the Maharaja of Nawanagar, and these are kind of again some of the most iconic Cartier jewels. That necklace in between that was recreated for Ocean's 8.
Yeah,
And
that's a replica, guys. Don't get
that is the
don't get
replica.
excited.
It's not the original one. And then we have the necklace beside it, the ruby one that was worn by Gloria Guinness at the famous ball in the 1960s. And we have that turban ornament, which was worn by the Qatari Sheikha at the coronation of King Charles. So
Hmm.
it's kind of a mix of such iconic jewels created from Devonshire, is a very small state in a very kind of backward part of India. And the fact that they had such a magnificent collection of jewelry and commissioned so much. And I think the collaboration between the Maharaja and Cartier, especially for the diamond necklace, that is such a kind of special story that they collected the two diamonds together for the sake of making this necklace. And it was really kind of it was in existence, I believe, from 38 until the 50s, and then we know it was kind of very crudely broken up by the family, and all the big diamonds sold off because no one really needed the. They had to kind of disperse the collection. So the fact that Cartier has been able to kind of maintain and preserve and bring together, because the Sir Page and the other jewels, they're often exhibited at Cartier exhibitions. So the fact that they're still in existence and come together, that's very special to see.
Hmm.
Yeah, and then we move on to the next bit, which is the kind of one of the most pieces that I feel a really special connection with, which is the Duchess of Devonshire's Cartier opal tiara. And this was something that I had researched quite a bit over the years. It was worn by the Duchess of Devonshire, who was the first mistress of the robes of the late Queen, and she wore it as a necklace, as a tiara, sometimes as brooches. And there's lots of contemporary reports of her finding out that she like talked to the press that the opals are so delicate that sometimes and under harsh lights she often like just reaches up and touches them, and she's like, are they still there or have they kind of dissolved into the lights, because opals are such a delicate stone. So there's kind of such lore about it. And then I wrote an article on it, I think in 2018 or 19, and I made the connection that it was worn by her daughter, Lady Elizabeth, who was one of Princess Margaret's lady in waiting, and then it was also worn by the sister of the Duke of Argyll at the Caledonian Ball a few years ago. So the fact that it was kind of still in use. And then I remember I worked a bit with the curator at Chatsworth to kind of research a bit more about this piece and find out uh, about it. But now that it's on display, that's very special, and I kind of feel a bit of a connection that I may have had a part in kind of promoting the tiara and making the story a bit public.
Yeah, it was funnily enough, that was the piece I think you were most excited about when the photos first started coming out. You said it was the Devonshire, they've got the Devonshire opal tiara.
Yeah, it was something I think like I have a special connection to it, so I felt in a sense involved, even though I'm sure didn't really put that into consideration.
Yeah.
But it was very special to see, even though it's not the most kind of beautiful piece. And opal is one of my birthstones, but I really do dislike it. So, but it was, I think the symbolism and the story of it as a tiara, that was very special. So that's
Hmm.
why I was so excited. Perfect. And then I think the exhibition starts with kind of one of the most iconic Cartier tiaras, which is the Manchester tiara that is a part of the V&A's permanent collection, and it really is such a massive piece, and one of the most iconic Cartier jewels I think created in the Belle Epoque era.
It's massive, but it's not my favorite. I've never been a fan.
I don't like the design either. It's just massive for the sake of being massive.
Yeah,
It is lovely to see when you go to the V&A jewel room, but it's not really among the highlights there, is it?
no, yeah.
But it's a nice kind of introduction to the exhibit when you enter in and see kind of the kind of a joint venture between Cartier and the V&A to start with this. So that was quite lovely.
Yeah, and wasn't I think the reason it was chosen to be, I could be wrong, but wasn't the reason it was chosen to start the exhibition was because it represented the three branches of Cartier, because obviously the Duchess of Manchester was American, but she was an English Duchess, but the tiara was made in Paris, and Cartier
Yeah,
famously had London, Paris, New York as branches.
exactly. So
Oh, so I
it
did get that
really,
right. Okay.
yes, you got that perfect. Now it really brought together, I think, the different elements of the exhibition.
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.
Perfect. Now, it really brought together, I think, the different elements of the exhibition and what they were trying to highlight, which was the relationship between the three brothers, and then at the same time, the fact it's in the V&A, and then it's also the Cartier jewels. So it ticked all those boxes. That's why it was
Mm,
chosen to
yeah.
start the exhibit.
Hmm.
And it's something I think we've seen this tiara so many times, we weren't
True.
wrong by it. So that
True.
is part of the reason. Those that have never seen it, they might find it a lot more spectacular than we did. So.
Mm,
Yeah, but this was another one of kind of the ducal highlights, and then we move on to the next bit, which has so here we have the Cartier Essex tiara, which I think lived up to the hype because it's the first time I ever saw it in person. But this is another one of those iconic Cartier pieces that it was created in 1902 for the Countess of Essex, who was again another American who married the British aristocracy, and she was actually never pictured wearing it. And at the next coronation, it was worn by her stepdaughter-in-law, and then it was famously worn by Clementine Churchill at the Queen's coronation in '53, which was kind of where it got so much fame. And then it was worn by the Countess of Essex's daughter in the late 50s. In the 90s, it was worn by the Crown Prince of Romania. And most recently, the tiara was worn by Rihanna for a magazine shoot, along with this Cartier choker. So this has become, again, one of those iconic Cartier pieces. And it was really spectacular. And the way it's displayed, I think, really showed it off to its best light.
yeah, it was an amazing display. It was sort of suspended in well, it was dry ice, but it looked like fog. Yeah, it was, and the background was sort of stars. It was a really interesting way to display it.
Yeah, which is very different from the way the other tiaras are put on display. So I really like that kind of the contrast from the others.
Hmm.
Yeah, and again, I think this is one of those pieces that is also really massive and just an iconic kind of Cartier design from the same era as the Manchester tiara, but this one kind of has a bit more kind of finesse and delicate. The design is much more delicate, whereas that one kind of just feels really
Mm.
big and massive for the sake of
Yeah.
being big.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, no, this is lovely to see. And then we move on to the next bit, which is one of my favorite jewels, so the Marchioness of Bute's Cartier emerald necklace. And this is something that I've seen, like, I think 3 or 4 times now, but this is, again, something that I keep coming back to, especially that massive emerald and the way it's suspended in this tiara. That's, I think, if there's any Cartier jewel that I'd save up a lot to buy, then this would be one of it.
And it also has a matching tiara now.
Yes, it does, in Malaysia, of all places. It's lovely and uh, again one of my favorite pieces. So this is I think this kind of ends the main bit and then we can go on to the next slide. And uh, this is now moving on to the non-royal jewel. And I mean I know Sam j doesn't really like Tutti Frutti jewels at all.
No, she does
This
not.
is kind of one of my favorites. It belonged to Daisy Fellows, who was I think she was the editor of Vogue or she was a big socialite back in the 30s up until the 50s, and she commissioned this Cartier Tutti Frutti necklace in the 30s. It was worn by Princess Caroline of Monaco in the 90s, and then most recently by the Princess of Jaipur, I think last year or earlier this year for a photo shoot. And this is, I think, it's not, I think the mix of stones and especially the sapphires are a bit too heavy to be a pretty piece, but it is very striking and it's a kind of statement piece.
It's striking, I'll give you that, but I'm not a fan.
Yeah. You're right. It is, I think the craftsmanship and the different stones are beautiful. I think together it's probably not the best.
Mm.
Yeah. And then this is kind of ending on a slightly non-royal note at the end of it. Yeah. And then this was our one of the glimpses from our kind of special display with Queen Aziza and Helen looking at the tiaras. But I wanted to kind of use the opportunity to ask kind of what were your overall thoughts on this exhibition, Sam? And kind of did you think that it lived up to the hype and it was as spectacular as kind of people were saying, or do you think could have been something could have been different?
Oh no, it definitely lived up to the hype. I mean, this is sort of the largest exhibition of Cartier jewels in London in, I think, 30 years. I could be
Yeah, it's
wrong
been
on
a
that,
long
but
time.
it's a one of those once in a lifetime exhibitions. The pieces that they brought together, like we said at the beginning, the royal loans they were able to obtain, the heritage pieces from the Cartier collection, they were outstanding. And the way the exhibition was displayed was amazing. You went through the history and then you went through the designs, and we haven't shown it here, but there's a whole section on the clocks that Cartier made, and Cartier
Clocks
art
and the watches.
and the watches, and they are very, as well as good jewelers, they're amazing watchmakers. So that was fascinating as well. Yeah, no, I wouldn't have changed anything about this exhibition. I mean, who doesn't want more tiaras? More is more. But it's fantastic, and kudos to Helen and the V&A for managing to put on such an amazing exhibition.
Yes, and inviting us to come see it because that I think our first visit was also a press visit, and then the second one where we got the private tour, that was I think this it's going to stay with us even if we get many private tours in the future. The first one I think will stay with us forever, and that makes it so much more special, especially for the fact that so many of the iconic Cartier jewels were on display, and we got to see everything and then discuss stuff in detail.
Mm,
That as an experience that will stay with me forever.
yes, me as well.
Yeah, and I think we move on to the next slide, which is basically the final bit, where just want to say thank you to everyone for listening, and I think we had just an amazing experience. And the exhibition, I believe, runs until the end of November. So if you have the time, we'd recommend go seeing it.
And if not, they had a beautiful catalogue, book of the exhibition. So we'd encourage you, if you can't make it, please do buy the book.
Yeah, because it really is special and you'll not regret that.
Mm.
Wonderful. So thank you again, Sam, for joining us today and discussing this special visit. And I think we're looking forward to going to see it again in a few weeks.
Well, yeah, lovely. All right, bye.
Bye bye.